Hello everyone, welcome back to Rolling Solo. My name is Adam Smith, and this is going to be my top 20 most anticipated solo games of 2020, at least currently, right now in this moment as I record this, because really this list could change within every minute, within every hour, even by the day and weekly, because different information, new news, all that kind of stuff comes out as the year goes on. Things change, and maybe some of these particular games that are scheduled to land, which is what this list is comprised of, in 2020, some of them might slip into 2021. You never know with some of this stuff, but from the entirety of the list that I'm aware of currently, all of these should be landing in 2020. And of course, if any aren't, you guys can let me know in the comments below. Also realize that this is just my personal list, so that's pretty much it. You're going to have a completely different list than me, but we might have some overlap. So it will be kind of cool to hear from you guys in the comments below, as I always love hearing. What are your most anticipated games for 2020? Because even if you can't name 20, I'm sure you've got a handful of them that you're really, really excited about. So we're going to start it off here going through each of them. They're not in order of my most anticipated to my least anticipated. I didn't think there was any value in that, seeing as none of these games have actually landed yet. And it's more so about just being excited about a bunch of different types of games. So we're going to go through these in alphabetical order, A to Z, so hopefully you'll join me, and let me know in the comments below whether you agree, disagree, or have other suggestions. So, without further ado, let's start off with Archice. That is the one we're starting this list off with, and this one intrigued me on Kickstarter when it landed, but also what intrigued me was the very well-known designers within this particular project. You can see there's 4 of them, and they all have some great games behind them, so the backing of that alone was what intrigued me. There's a lot going on with this one. It definitely falls into that adventure game, dungeon crawler style of a game. It's got campaign mechanisms inside of it, some beautiful miniatures. We'll take a look at some pictures in a second, but there's also some 3D terrain, there's walls. It's very interesting, very modular. So if you want to check out more, obviously check out Board Game Geek for any more information that way. I wanted to point you this because I really thought it was an interesting project. It's obviously solo playable right out of the gates, as all the games on this list will be. Here is a look at the Kickstarter campaign that ran, and wow, like big time numbers for this one, again, with those backing of those particular designers being involved in Seven Wonders, Cyclades, and Sea of Clouds. There's just a number of games that they have put together before that really kind of bring some really big oomph into this particular campaign that really made me look at it a little bit differently than I would a normal game that just has tons of miniatures involved. So going down this list here, we can take a look at some of the rest of the key features of the game, because this actually could be very easily pinpointed as the best things about this particular one. A thrilling new game by this particular team of designers, as I've already talked about, an immersive mystery-packed campaign with over 30 hours of gameplay. You got a free dungeon crawler mode for more replayability, an exhilarating mysterious universe where ancient Egypt meets steampunk, so that's kind of the mixture there of what's going on. It's very cool because ancient Egypt isn't something that's overly done, at least in this kind of capacity. Fully cooperative 1 to 5 players, outstanding artwork, and spectacular minis. So there's a lot going on with this one. I'm very excited to see how this turns out, and I really like what they're doing with this here. If you want to find out more, you can use this resource here on Kickstarter for the campaign, or Board Game Geek to find out more details. Altar Quest is the next one that I'm looking forward to in 2020. This comes from Adam Sadler and Brady Sadler from Blacklist Games. Another very successful Kickstarter that we'll take a look at in a second. It is a very beautiful looking game. They had some painted miniatures during the campaign showing off some gameplay. Looks really good. If you are familiar with Hero Quest, the board itself is definitely going to be right up your alley, because you're going to look at this and go, yep, that reminds me of Hero Quest. And that's essentially some of the inspiration for this game. However, not just that, they've also added in their own twist to things. This is not to be essentially a Hero Quest revamp or anything like that. It's just they're inspired by Hero Quest, and they added their own gameplay and mechanisms in behind it. They've also got that modular deck system in there, which was introduced, as it mentions here, from Street Masters, Brook City, all that good stuff. So if you like that system of card play, then that's going to be what's found here in Altar Quest. If you want to find out more information, again, Board Game Geek's a great site for this stuff. You're going to have solo play right out of the gates, and this is a highly exciting entry for solo gamers, at least in terms of a Blacklist Games production in 2020. If we take a quick look at the actual campaign for the Kickstarter, it was very successful, raising $600,000 plus, at least during the campaign window. And there was lots of stretch goals that were added in, but you can see a much better view of the pictures and those particular shots I was talking about earlier on. It's a very beautiful looking game, of course. It won't come painted, but if you happen to paint them, it's going to look really nice on the table. And again, definitely has that Hero Quest vibe in there. So very, very excited to see how this ends up working out. But I feel like this is going to be one of their best of the series of games that they have that use that modular deck system. I think this is going to be a winner. So very much looking forward to this one. Also has Isaac pulled in here for a expansion. So that's pretty cool as well. So again, just a beautiful looking game, and can't wait to see this thing hit the table in 2020. Next up on the list is Chronicles of Crime 1400 from Lucky Duck Games. This one has a Kickstarter landing in March, and I'm happy to announce that I'll be doing a Kickstarter preview video for this particular game, and I've also done some Kickstarter preview videos for the original Chronicles of Crime that came out way back in 2018. I knew way back then that this game was going to be something special. It kind of interacted with cards, with QR codes, and all kinds of stuff to really give you a very streamlined gaming experience. It's just a lot of fun, and if you play this thing solo, it's just as fantastic as playing it with a group, and I highly recommend this one. So when 1400 was announced that it was coming, I was definitely interested in showing you guys what the newest entry has for you. So we'll be talking about that more as we get closer to March. But I did want to make sure you understand one key difference between this one versus the original Chronicles of Crime, if you're wondering what they're doing differently in this one. And that is, they're going to be doing what's called a Millennium Series with this one. So basically, it's going to be, them coming back with a Millennium Series, which is going to have 3 brand new standalone Chronicles of Crime games. And 1400 is one of them, 1900 is the other one, and then 2400 is the last one. And all 3 of the games are going to be standalone, so you can pick them and just play them as they are. But they're also going to have some connecting narrative threads. So if you do happen to get all 3, then there will be some stuff that's going to be trailing across the millennium between those different time frames. So I find that really cool, because if you really get into those particular scenarios, there could be a lot there to really grab onto in terms of the story. The original Chronicles of Crime was very much a one-shot per scenario type thing. There wasn't carryover to the next one. So I'm interested to see how that will work. But yes, Chronicles of Crime has been high on my charts ever since it got released. Dawna Madness is up next. This comes from Dimension Games, and if you're familiar with Dimension Games, they created Deep Madness, which is a fantastic game that I enjoy playing on the channel as well as offline. But this is a new entry for them, a brand new game, brand new kind of creation. However, there are some ties to essentially what was going on in Deep Madness in this game. There's some of that crazy horror going on. So again, in terms of that detail, I'm going to leave all that out or things will get really confusing. But basically, it's a story-driven cooperative game, survival horror for 1 to 4 players. And you can see right there, it's set in the same universe. So that's kind of why I made that comparison, that there is some tie over there in terms of the universe. But it is a different game. It's definitely going to be pushing the horror agenda quite aggressively. It's trying to do things like Silent Hill, The Evil Within, Alan Wake, all that kind of stuff. The mind-bending psychological stuff that it mentions right here. So I am really excited for this one. I've had my eye on it since the Kickstarter launched. When it did launch, it was very exciting to see that they raised way over $1 million. They had tons of backers behind this thing, and it looks crazy. Like, the element of horror in this thing is kind of off the charts. So I'm really interested to see whether this is going to live up to the expectations of how good it looks. It certainly does stand out. Has some really interesting mechanics going on there. You can see there's puzzle pieces going on, so you'll be putting things together like that. There's just a lot to talk about with this one, but I do believe all the rule books, I think, are attached to this Kickstarter, so if you want to find out more and read them, they're fully available, which is a really nice touch with this, so you can actually understand, do I like this gameplay before I dive into this? So again, another one to keep your eyes on. Again, this one came through Kickstarter, but I am very, very excited to see what this one does when it hits the table. But definitely trying to hit that horror agenda at the most extreme pace. I think out of all of the games on this list, this one has horror at the most aggressive stance by far. Next on the list is Dwellings of Vale. So I'm very excited about this one. This comes from Breaking Games. Definitely has different things going on with this than what you'd expect from me normally, but I love this kind of stuff. Area majority influence game. I enjoy worker placement and stuff like this. I don't cover a ton of them on the channel, but I can tell you right now, I really do enjoy Euro mechanics as well. And this one looks to have a really good theme and really good presence wrapped around this kind of stuff. So I think they're going to mesh this stuff really, really nicely. So I am very excited for this. It's an epic worker placement game set in a once lost magical world. There's giant monsters in it. So it's got all this kind of stuff going on, engine building and all this kind of stuff. So again, if you're a solo player looking to kind of find something that fits that because you don't have much of that in your collection, I definitely recommend that you check out this one. Again, we'll go over here to the Kickstarter itself so you can see they were very successful in their Kickstarter, raised over $500,000 for this project. And again, you can see more of the pictures of what it'll look like on the actual table. Game trays, again, you've seen these quite often actually in a couple unboxings I've done recently. Game trays just takes the organization of a game, especially setup and teardown times, just knocks it right down because it's so quick to get the game out. So it's nice to see them having them involved in this. Again, the components look gorgeous. The game looks great, and I am very, very excited to see how this thing turns out when it finally lands. You can see here they've got the Ghosts of Vale here, which is a solo play. It's included in all the editions, so you're guaranteed to get it. But yes, that is an interesting one and certainly deserves to be on the list, at least in my opinion. Next game on the list is Etherfields. This comes from Awakened Realms. I did a Kickstarter preview on this and really had a lot of fun. I know the community here at Rolling Solo really enjoyed that one. We talked about it quite a bit, and I mean, honestly, everybody was. This thing was a massive Kickstarter last year. It raised a ridiculous amount of money and had a lot of backers behind it, which is crazy for the dollar value that this thing was. Typically, you see that kind of level of support backer-wise on the cheaper campaigns, but you know something special when it pulls in that many people on a more costlier Kickstarter. So this went down definitely as one of the biggest Kickstarters for board games ever, and it was the highest, in terms of raising funds from last year easily, in terms of solo playable board games, but even all board games in general. So what's really exciting with this one, what I really liked when I played the Kickstarter preview on the channel, was the fact that it didn't give you much information going into it. You'd usually think, well, that's pretty bad. It doesn't have anything to tell you why you're even playing it. You think that would be a bad thing, and I don't know if the final version will have a little write-up to let you know, what's starting off your journey, how does this really begin. But I liked not knowing anything. I liked going into it, and just everything felt like a shock and like a mystery to unravel, kind of like, why am I doing this? What is happening? Why did this event just happen? Why did I just find this note? Why is this scribbled on the wall over here? Why, if I go through this portal, I pop out over in this area? And it just became this whole idea of like trying to connect the dots with everything. And the more I played, the more of that I felt. And then, of course, the prototype ended because it's only a snapshot of the game. And I just wanted to play more. I just wanted to play more, but there was nothing else I could play. So I literally said as a quote when I was doing this particular thing is Etherfields is an immersive experience, because it was. I was playing through something that like I didn't truly understand. But when I was done, I was like, I had a blast and I wanted to understand. I wanted to keep playing to find out what else is happening in this story. So again, it comes from Awakened Realms. They've been actually knocking it out of the park recently with great games. Nemesis was absolutely fantastic. They've had a number of great games. Tainted Grail, obviously a fantastic game as well. And the narrative side of their games is really, really strong. So when they have something like this in a dream world, my imagination kind of goes off the rails. And my excitement level goes quite high. So really hoping this one holds up to how excited I really am about it. And I really hope that the individuals that jumped in on it are just as excited for it, but it should be a very, very, very interesting when it lands Wave 1 in 2020. I think there's going to be a lot of people that are going to perk up about this one. And again, just like Tainted Grail, I think there's going to be a number of people that might have skipped on it and they're going to go, yikes, I probably shouldn't have. It's going to be something special. So this is definitely deserving to be on the list. And honestly, if it wasn't on the list, I'd have to scrap this entire entire list. Everdell is up next. It had 2 expansions which are coming in 2020, even though this says 2019. I haven't even received the expansions for it yet, and I know a lot of others haven't either. I think this is just one of those cases where games have basically been sent out the door at the tail end of 2019, so some people might have gotten them, but the majority are getting them in 2020. So just ignore the 2019 for right now, because that's not necessarily true. The same thing happened for Nemesis actually on Board Game Geek. It was sitting at 2018, but most people didn't get it until 2019. So it you know, sometimes when it lands right on the new year in terms of delivery, it doesn't always, you know, sit correctly in terms of the year showing on this site. But these are the 2 games, 2 expansions I should say, so you need the base game of Everdell in order to play it. But they're just going to enhance the game overall. They're all solo playable out of the box, which is fantastic. I love the look, feel, mechanics, everything about this thing. It's worker placement again. So again, that's probably more of a shock for people, is that I don't have tons of worker placement on the channel. I do have games like Scythe I've done in the past and other ones that are worker placement, but I really do enjoy Euro mechanics as well. It just takes a lot for me to really enjoy a Euro-based game, because I really need the theme to be present and to make sense in the actual gameplay. And I find a lot of Euro games really lack in that category, and they're getting better as time goes on, because this merger, especially when Gloomhaven landed, of Euro and kind of Ameritrash games, really has already started, and you know, the ball's already been rolling for quite some time. And this is a great game if you're looking for something that's just beautiful on the table. Now, there's no pictures in this Kickstarter that show the entirety of all these different areas sitting out. In other words, all expansions that used at once. But you can see like this one here for Spirecrest, it looks beautiful by itself. If you're familiar with the way the Everdell board looks like just originally from the base game, it was beautiful by itself as well. Look like this. So there's like this giant tree kind of sitting, and there's all this area here, and you're playing in this just absolutely beautiful. The components are great. But again, everything that gets added on to the sides of this base game and to the back of it and everything. So it really starts expanding out and out and out and out, giving you more and more options when you're playing. So this is one, if you haven't checked it out, you want to find out more, highly recommend you check it out. Their actual Kickstarter overall was very successful. They were just shy of $1 million and had tons of backers, because again, people are getting in on this thing late, and some people are just you know, grabbing just the expansions. But either way, definitely recommendation for solo play Everdell. Moving right along, we have Merchant's Cove coming in 2020 from Final Frontier Games. This one caught me by surprise on Kickstarter, and guess what? It's a Euro. That's right. There's quite a few Euros on this list, quite a few games like that this time around. I'm actually excited for that, because it just means theming in terms of Euro mechanics, they're getting better. They're getting better at pairing them together. Companies are doing a much better job of taking because Euro mechanics are very smart mechanics. And if you can actually put a theme with those mechanics that makes sense, a game can be magical. And there's quite a few of them here that I'm really hoping live up to the excitement level that I saw during the Kickstarters. But this one was definitely one I was interested in. It is a highly asymmetrical Euro game. Each player takes control of a completely different fantasy merchant, like an alchemist or a captain, time traveler, or blacksmith. You've got economic, fantasy. It's obviously nautical because it's a Merchant's Cove. Kind of says so right in the title, gives it away. You've got a bunch of mechanisms here, like commodity speculation, dice rolling still there, the rondel, tile placement, time track. The game just looks really cool. You'll want to check out this particular page if you want to find out more information, but even better, check out the Kickstarter, because it raised $600,000+ during its run. It looks awesome on the table. This is what captured me. They did such a good, I don't know, the artist behind this one, which I'll give credit for right here, that individual did a fantastic job of making this game eye-catching, because if this was what the final production looks like, it's going to be beautiful on the table. The fact that solo play is built in makes me very happy. It looks awesome. I just can't say enough about it. It just looks great. So I cannot wait to see whether this holds up in a solo capacity the way that I hope it does. You've got the solo mode here, 18 cards and 1 board shop, so they're making it specific, built in right from the ground up. So very excited. And yeah, it's just a beautiful looking production. So hopefully, maybe you've never heard of this one, and this is the first time you're hearing about it, and that's great, because that's what this list is hopefully aiming to do, is bring some attention to some of these games you might not even heard of, or maybe you thought you were going to get, or maybe you saw it, but you didn't realize there was any solo play. So again, really interesting. So Merchant's Cove, for me, belongs on this list. Metal Gear Solid, the board game, is coming out in 2020, and you can see it's Emerson Matsuuchi, and definitely just from the designer's name alone and the things that that designer has done and been a part of, this is one worth keeping an eye on. Of course, I'm a big Metal Gear Solid fan myself. I played Metal Gear Solid growing up, and I cannot wait to see what they do with this thing in terms of its actual mechanics within the game. I think just the idea of Metal Gear Solid in general fits really well into a board game. Now, I don't have as many details about this one that I wish I did, but you can see some example play and prototype information and images here from the miniatures and the actual gameplay itself being played. I am very excited for this one, and I'm going to be keeping my ears to the ground for more information as it goes along, but this is one, if you're a fan of the IP or you're a fan of the designer involved in this one, that might be enough to tip you into checking this out a little further. Solo play is definitely going to be in there. It's coming from IDW Games. Next up on the list, we have Rhinebusters from Mythic Games. This one landed, was a very successful Kickstarter. We'll talk about that in a second. You can definitely play this thing solo because it's a cooperative game. I'm excited for this one mainly because I don't have any games in this, category of adventure games that land in World War II in terms of the time frame. So that's interesting. This one's again in 1944 during World War II, and it kind of has a spin on things. It's fantasy. It's kind of taking things that happened in real life at a high level and then warping it to work for this particular game, or changing what was available to the Nazis at that time. So they have these secret experiments and be able to harness a different type of power that they didn't actually have in real life. So it really does throw this fantasy element in there, and they did a really cool job with the miniatures and stuff. I'll show you some pictures from the Kickstarter now so you get an idea. You can obviously do your research here on Board Game Geek, but the actual Kickstarter did fantastic. It was just shy of $1 million, so I am excited for this one to land. There are a lot. I mean, this is one, this probably out of all of them is the most miniature heavy by far, but again, this definitely lands in the dungeon crawler vibe. So if you've already got enough games like this, you might want to pass on it. But if you don't, I think there's something really unique here, something really cool. So again, we'll know more when this actually lands as to how the actual gameplay stands up on its own. But it certainly is an interesting time frame to have this type of game. And I really like the sculpts and everything going on here. It just seems really, really cool. Now, the closest thing I would have had to this would have been Fireteam Zero, because I believe that was set in one of the World War time frames, and I forget which one. But basically, that was kind of, again, an alternate universe, alternate path of that time frame, but that was one that I really enjoyed back in the day. So now this one, I guess, would be the newest entry. There's a lot of add-ons for this thing, as I mentioned, lots of miniatures, but we'll see how this one shapes up when it lands, but it certainly deserves a spot on this list for me. Sleeping Gods absolutely lands on this list. First off, for the fact it's solo playable right out of the gate without any expansions involved. Near and Far required the Amber Mines expansion in order to make one of Ryan Laukatt's games that actually was really, really good solo playable, whereas this one's going to be solo playable right out of the gates. I love his work. Not only does he design his own games, he's the artist of his own games. He does it all. It's Red Raven Games. Fantastic. He has lots and lots of games up his sleeve in the past. So let's take a look at what this is all about. Well, it's a campaign game, as it mentions here, and you can play this, as I mentioned, all soloable. So you are using hand management, push your luck. Storytelling is the key here with Ryan Laukatt. He always seems to have these games that have these books inside them, these narrative books. Check out the dollars raised in the Kickstarter, well over 1 million, 12,000 backers. There's certain people like me that whenever a Ryan Laukatt game lands, I'm instantly interested because I always know it's going to have this fantastic look, this uniform feel. Look what he's done here with the actual book. So again, he's done this all the way along with Near and Far and Above and Below and things like that. He's got this coiled book, and as you explore through the world and kind of go through each of these pages, you flip the page to then go to the next area. So it's just like this brilliant design because it makes it all compact and very easily savable. Plus, he's got all the other cards and everything else around it. His artwork is fantastic, as I've mentioned. But this one is going to be a huge open world game that's just all about exploring. And that, to me, this first sentence just draws me in right away. So I was all over this one. So again, what's really cool too about his games is even though they go to Kickstarter, there's typically just a thing or two that are Kickstarter exclusive. So in this case, like metal coins, I think Near and Far was the same. So if you pick it up retail, you're not losing any of the major gameplay by going ahead and doing so. But this is one I certainly recommend that you check out and look into because it looks to be an absolute winner. Here we have Solomon Kane. Absolutely deserves to be on this list because honestly, I do agree with this. Best, we don't know yet because the game hasn't landed yet, yet, obviously, but most people are saying the best way to play this is going to be solo or 2-player, and I really think it's going to be pushing more towards solo. This is again coming from Mythic Games. They have so many games coming out that are solo playable in the next little bit, which is really exciting. But honestly, out of all of them, I think this is going to be the winner. I think this is the one that people are most excited about that's going to be landing in 2020. I know I am. I did a video at Gen Con, so you can actually search that on my channel if you want to find out more about the game and how it plays. Really looking forward to this landing. I'm not going to talk too much about what's going on here, but you've got acts you're going to be going through, number of chapters. It's definitely going to have it's a cooperative game, of course, which allows you to play solo, but it's adventure, exploration, fantasy. It definitely is going to have that story narrative behind it. You're going to be playing through chapters and connections between the narrative. The actual Kickstarter itself landed and raised well over $1 million. Was very, very successful, and it does include a lot of content, and it does look beautiful. And I remember playing on some of these maps when I was actually Gen Con, and they were prototype at the time, but they were glossy, and man, did they look good. I don't think they're going to be glossy in the final version, though, because again, that was all prototype, but they look so, so nice. And the virtues were really cool, which are the large ones right here. Again, that video will show you a lot of that stuff. So if you want to do your research on whether or not this is something you're interested in, I highly recommend checking this one out, because I really think for a solo gamer's perspective, this is one that deserves, or at least will probably play better solo. It could also play really enjoyable at the 2-player count, but that's probably as high as you're going to want to go with it. So I can't wait for this one to land. Super excited about it. I think a lot of you guys are as well, but deserving to be on the list for sure. Sword and Sworcery Ancient Chronicles. This is a new standalone point here for Sword and Sworcery, a new entry point really into the series. So if you want to pick it up, you've never picked up Sword and Sworcery before, this is going to be an option for you. If you already have the original Mortal Souls content, then this can still be used and can still be mixed and matched to some degree with that original content still, and also be used as its own story and things like that. So it's very, very cool, very, very modular that way. So I do like what they're doing there. Going down the description, it'll kind of make a lot more sense as you read through this paragraph right here. But essentially, it's fully compatible with the original content and campaign in terms of gameplay, allows you to cross some heroes and monsters over between them, but it's going to have a new cycle, introducing new elements to the setting and expanding the narrative engine and all that good stuff. It's a dungeon crawler, it's fantasy, and honestly, it's when people say dungeon crawler and fantasy, you think cookie cutter game. This honestly is one of the better entries for that. If you're looking for a fantasy dungeon crawler, Sword and Sworcery really is the ticket. Now, in terms of its actual complexity, it's actually quite complex. And it's probably due to its fiddliness more so than anything else in terms of remembering icons and the different tokens you have to deal with. But man, once you get it down, it is so much fun. The actual Kickstarter landed and it made over $500,000, had very good success on Kickstarter. And as you can see here, as I mentioned, standalone. I have done a Sword and Sworcery video series on the channel, so you can check that out if you've never seen it before. It'll help you make up your mind as to whether or not the gameplay is what you're looking for. But again, this is going to add some stuff in here that I've never seen before. So that's why it's on this list, because I'm anticipating it. Plus, it might actually push this game further up my list for me, because I haven't had Sword and Sworcery high on my dungeon crawler list for some time, because it came out, the original one came out quite some time ago. So if I go to versions here, maybe I'll go to expansions instead. There might be a way to jump to the prior. I'm actually quite surprised that there isn't a listing here that states at the top about the original Sword and Sworcery. It's not tied to it in any way, which is kind of odd. But either way, the original Sword and Sworcery came out, I believe, in 2017, I want to say. So it's been some time since some solid content has come out for the game. Let's just confirm that. Yeah, 2017, bang on. So that's the thing, like, it's been a while. So this hopefully will kind of push it up the charts for me if the content is good. Next on the list, we have the Isofarion Guard landing in 2020 from Sky Kingdom Games. We definitely did some Kickstarter preview videos on this particular one when it was on Kickstarter. What's really cool about this one is the Foreteller app, which is fantastic, and is going to be interwoven into the narrative of this game to really drive the whole story. So you can see right here, solo and cooperative, narrative-driven, adventure board game for 1 to 2 players. So really, this is probably going to play best at 1 player, to be honest. 2-player will be fun, but it's going to be even better, I think, solo, because you'll be able to make all those decisions for yourself, being that it's a narrative-driven game. It also has some really interesting bag mechanics, or deck, bag, and pool building. That's kind of the key mechanism within the game, in my opinion. So you're going to be traveling through all kinds of different cities and wilderness, and there's all kinds of unique stories and events that are going to happen. Think, they really took kind of a look at, from my understanding at least, in terms of the feel of it, it kind of feels like a Skyrim-esque type game where you can kind of just go where you want. Now, you'll be maybe constrained at the beginning, but as you go on, you can technically go off the beaten path and do your own thing. So that's kind of interesting. I don't know how open that will be when the final great game hits, but I like that idea that you can just kind of travel around and do as you please to upgrade your character. Now, the original Kickstarter itself here landed. It made over $200,000, had over almost 4,000 backers, and was very, very successful. So I'll show you some of the artwork here, because not all of you may have seen all of this yet. But this is essentially the world map. The figures are quite large and will sit on the map depending on what node you're on. You can see these little white nodes. And then some of them, of course, are actually tied to cities, which you'll go inside of. And once you go inside of a city or one of these larger areas, you kind of get a mini map where you can explore more into that area. These chips are used for almost everything, whether it be combat, cooldowns for particular abilities you're using, or even locations on those mini maps. So they're used in a number of different ways. The art on these have actually gone up in quality, more so than what the original Kickstarter prototype showed. I did really enjoy, as I mentioned, my time with this one, so I can't wait to see how this one turns out in the end. It was a lot of fun. Plus, game trays again is in here, and honestly, I'm becoming more and more of a fan of game trays being in these Kickstarters, because it just does such a good job of keeping things organized, and it's just something that's always drove me crazy about big time games, is that not having those inserts. So them going down this road was a very smart move, and I can't wait to see how the Isofarion Guard pans out in 2020. Here we have Title Blades, Heroes of the Reef. This comes from Druid City Games. The designers and artists are listed out here. This one really caught my attention on Kickstarter. The artists deserve a lot of credit, honestly, for capturing my attention. When I saw it on Kickstarter, it was beautiful looking. We'll show you some stuff from Kickstarter in a second, rather than going through these pictures here. Quickly, if you want to see the description or read through it, you can pause the screen. There's quite a bit going on here, but essentially this gives you some background as to what it's all about. What I really want to highlight is the mechanisms here. There's a lot of different and interesting mechanisms all jammed into one thing. You got worker placement, variable player powers, set collection, hand management, dice rolling, card crafting. So many different things going on there, and I really like that. Again, you're seeing worker placement show up quite a bit in this list, because for whatever reason, going into 2020, there's a lot of thematic worker placement games coming out that are really cool. So the whole point is you're going to be taking on the role of a young hero, competing to be named a Title Blade. So there's a tournament going on through the day and night as you try to do this, taking down monsters, trying to become that hero or champion. So the actual Kickstarter raised $750,000 plus. There was almost 9,000 backers. Big time stuff here. Brand new entry for Druid City Games, which is really exciting. And again, this is the reason why I captured my attention. It just looked beautiful on Kickstarter. I'm really hoping that the actual gameplay lives up to the level of production quality it looks like in this visual representation. The actual updates, if you check them up, the most recent one has an unboxing, I believe, and some videos of the retail version as well as the deluxe version. So that's a nice way to take a look and see what the final versions look like versus what the pictures are here in this Kickstarter. But I can tell you they look even better than what's here. The dice are all laid out here. Again, there's dice in this game, so if you're a dice lover, you're going to have that. Solo mode's built right in as part of the Kickstarter, and you can see game trays involved again. You're seeing them pop up like crazy, but again, I love them because this is giving you some quick setup and teardown times, and a nice way to organize things without having to just chuck everything in the box in a mess. Game looks beautiful on the table, and again, just hoping that gameplay is just as great as how it looks. You're going to be visiting the islands, attempting challenges, customizing your character, and upgrading your dice, fighting monsters, and really the ultimate goal is to become a champion as you move up the track. So the solo play, of course, will be a little different than the competitive play of playing against other players, but I'm very intrigued to see how this pans out when it lands. So this deserves a spot on the list simply because it's new and refreshing. Time of Legends Destinies is absolutely one that had my eye, and this is because of my love for Joan of Arc from Mythic Games. And Lucky Duck Games and Mythic Games are working together essentially here, but Lucky Duck Games kind of rules the roost in terms of the publishing of this particular one. But this is going to have some really interesting mechanics built in. Again, remember, Chronicles of Crime comes from Lucky Duck Games, and they're really pulling from that in order to build out Time of Legends Destinies. So if you want to find a little bit more about about this. It's going to be a competitive, story-driven game of adventure, exploration, mixing in an app and a board game. So you do have to be aware of the fact there is going to be an app. They're going to have that scan and play technology that they had from Chronicles of Crime, which is again going to open up lots of doors to be able to create these really cool adventures. You're going to find things like dice rolling. There's role-playing elements for sure in here. That's one of the biggest ties in. That's really cool because, again, it's a board game, but it's going to have those role-playing elements. So if you're looking for something to that level, this might be the ticket. Storytelling, tile placements all in there. Let's take a look at some of the pictures of the actual gameplay in case you've never seen this one before. When it landed on Kickstarter, it raised over $600,000 and had almost 9,000 backers as well, so it was very, very successful that way. Going through the list here, many different individuals covered this one, and I was actually looking forward to doing so, but the solo version or the solo play in this one wasn't available at the time of the Kickstarter, but now I believe that has been fully in development during the time frame of the Kickstarter afterwards, where the major development really takes place. And you can see right here, this is what it will look like on the table. So very much, when I first looked at it, it very much has, at least with the tiles anyway, it kind of has that Seventh Continent vibe in terms of the tile flipping and moving around. But again, you're going to have this, I think, much more rich narrative going on than what you would expect in Seventh Continent, where it was just specific to what you see on the cards. This is going to have the app involved, so that's going to take it to another level. I don't want to necessarily compare it to Seventh Continent because I don't think that's what they're doing here, but you can see there's some inspiration in terms of how they use those cards. Going down here, you can see some key features of the game. So this is really important. So you're creating a game where the narrative part would be the most prominent one, yet being driven by an app so that all players can enjoy it the same way with an optimum flow, shape it, and allow a competitive experience that no other games have managed to offer yet in the genre. So they're doing a couple things that hopefully have never been done before, and something that's going to be really interesting. So you can see the narratives there. You're going to have choices. Those choices are going to obviously have repercussions as you go through the story. And again, if you loved Chronicles of Crime, you're going to find yourself right at home here in terms of the QR code scanning and how that flowed. And of course, I'm sure they're going to step up things to the next level. They've even got a community scenario editor in here, which can allow you to kind of, as a community, go ahead and start creating scenarios on their own. So again, a very, very exciting entry. Looking forward to this one landing in 2020. Here we have Too Many Bones, Splice, and Dice from Chip Theory Games. I'm sure you guys are very much well aware of Too Many Bones. If you have followed my channel for any time at all, you'll notice that I have 2 full playthroughs of Too Many Bones because my love for this game is off the charts. I absolutely think it's a fantastic solo game, and although the barrier to entry, at least for their very original Too Many Bones, was a little daunting at that time frame, being that it was up over $100 for the core experience, the weight, the production quality, and everything else really, really was worth it. And honestly, now coming up to current day, that dollar amount actually is still a great buy for what you get components wise, quality wise, and in terms of gameplay wise. And they've gone to the next level here with Too Many Bones, Splice, and Dice, again adding more into the experience to just further flush out this thing. So what's really interesting about this one? Well, you're going to be allowed to actually create your own tyrant using the baddies from your Too Many Bones base games and add-ons. So the more you have, the more goofing around you can do, and basically you're literally building the big bosses that are going to come out to come get you. So that's really interesting. I'm really, really interested to see how this is going to all pan out, but it's certainly going to allow for more replayability and also going to throw a lot more different ways for you to work around your strategies to beat these tyrants. So this is going to be a nice expansion addition to the game. Taking a look at the Kickstarter that landed, it raised over $1 million, which is not surprising in the least. They've also got some extra characters coming along with this one too. You'll definitely want to check out this page for more information, but honestly, you can also check out my playthroughs to see just how fun this game really is. And of course, there's a number, or I should say there's 2 major entry points into the game, and that's Undertow and Too Many Bones. Too Many Bones is one I was talking about in terms of the original dollar cost being a bit high, but you can see it was a large box with 4 gear locks inside and a whole slew of tyrants to go up against. Undertow cut that down in terms of cost and only put 2 gear locks in, making it a much better entry point for individuals wondering whether this was going to be a fit for them. So if you're not sure, Undertow is your ticket. If you're 100% sure, go for the core game. And if you're crazy and you love it so much, get them both. It is a fantastic system. But Splice and Dice here is going to be landing this year. Cannot wait to see how this pans out. But you can see They're so creative with their die cut neoprene player mats. They look absolutely beautiful. You can get the chips in there as well, and you can see that's going to be how they put all those baddies in there with the different dice, and end up coming out with some kind of crazy tyrant that's going to have all kinds of different skills and abilities, which will certainly throw strategy curveballs at you as you go through. So that is Splice and Dice. I couldn't be more excited for it. We'll see how it all pans out in 2020. Next on the list is Trudvang Legends. This comes from Simon Games. Very excited about this one. The overall weight is dead even average. And we're going to be jumping into some pictures here through the Kickstarter in a second. But first, I want to show you the description of the game to find out where this game came from. It's all based on a Swedish RPG, Trudvang Chronicles. So if you're an RPG player at all, then you're going to be familiar, likely, with this particular Trudvang Chronicles. And of course, that's what this is based on. So there's lots of story to drive on or to use when moving through with a board game. It's going to have an epic saga in this one. There's going to be multiple storybooks across multiple expansions. And the coolest thing is this, really. You're going to have, this is kind of the key feature, the key thing that really drew me in was you're going to be manifesting physically as parts of the board game actually change on the board itself. So when you make the changes in the game, you're going to see them visually. And that's really cool because every time you go ahead and put your game away, you have these sleeves on the game board that represent the different landmarks or conditions that have happened to them or effects that's happened to that location. And then later, if you don't play for 6 months and you come back to it and you open your game board up, you'll immediately look and go, oh yes, I remember that castle over there was completely destroyed, or this over here was affected in this particular way, because everything's sitting exactly the way you left it. So I like that a lot because most games just have a board, some nodes on it to move through, and then you have to try to remember in your mind what actually happened using all the cards in front of you that you've ziplocked off to the side. But this one is going to capture it all right on the game board itself. Plus, you can actually fold the whole game board up and all the cards are perfectly safe as well. So again, when they design the game board, they're going to be smart about where the placement of that stuff is. So I'll show you exactly what it looks like. But first, the Kickstarter ran $1.5 million, basically, and probably made it easily over and after the PM. 11,000 backers involved, and moving down here you can see what this game board actually looks like. But again, you'll see the folds for the board itself are going to miss every single area where the sleeves are, so you literally can have cards in your board and fold your entire board up, put it in the box without worrying about any cards being bent or destroyed. But they've just, again, designed around that and made smart choices. So there's tons of expansions for this, and you'll see there's storybooks in each of these expansions, so I'm really interested to see how that pans out. They are going to use runes in the game, so I guess you'll be flipping these runes and you'll be able to use them in order to play the game. So that's going to be different. I don't have many games that use runes as its primary method of playing the game, or at least instead of dice and things like that. So that'll be cool. There's, like I said, ridiculous amounts of miniatures involved. I'll see if I can get myself a picture here of the game board a little bit better. So here you go. You can see the creases here, but again, they designed it in a way so that all the sleeves would be protected. But you're going to, again, you're not just stuck to this board. What was also really interesting, going back up to the expansions, was that some of these expansions actually include additional game boards inside of them. So you're going to have other areas to attach onto the main game board and kind of venture off into other areas. So it really does expand quite a bit. And so you can see here, you remember your actions because you've slid in something like you found a particular area in a particular section of the map. And then your actual choices that you make are going to be captured through these story cards, and they're going to be all done on this board, which is just, I think it's so cool. So it's definitely going to feel like an RPG board game. I think it's going to do things a little bit differently than what most people are used to. So for that reason, I'm very, very interested to see how this is going to pan out. Oathsworn Into the Deepwood is absolutely deserving to be on this list due to its sheer size and how much I enjoyed doing the Kickstarter preview for this one. I really did. The gameplay was fantastic, and it certainly left me wanting to play more. What I really like about this one that's different than other games out there that have that epic campaign style play is just the pacing of it. I really like that you kind of went through a session of a city, for instance, where you go through a bunch of narrative choices that then have all kinds of repercussions that then lead you into kind of a major battle or major boss fight, where those choices you made in the narrative earlier actually give you advantages and disadvantages and also tie together some of the story for you. So when you hit those big time bosses and you open up a new box, all of which are all closed and sealed off for the bosses, it's a really cool experience. And what I also really like too is it does mix Ameritrash as well as Euro elements together. So you've got like the ability during combat to push your luck with combat dice that blow up, which is awesome. So you can have a really pathetic weapon that does some massive damage, kind of similar to Arcadia Quest there, and I've always loved that mechanic because it just feels so good when you get that critical hit and just keep on going. But the other thing you can do is you can couple it with this Euro-style cooldown system of battle flow, allowing you to use certain abilities, and you can use that strategically to push cards around your player board while they cool down in a way to get those cards back in your hand to be reused again. And there's a whole mini game really behind using that efficiently. Plus, when you're going ahead and making an attack with exploding dice, you can choose not only to use dice, you can also use cards. And if you use the cards, the mini cards, they have the exact same odds as the dice do. But as you use the cards and choose to use them, you start to gain knowledge as to whether you've got bad ones in there or good ones in there in terms of what's left over. So you can start strategizing how many dice do you want to use and how many cards do you want to use, or do you want to use just one or the other? And you get to choose that stuff. And I really liked the the availability of that choice, because most games come down to use dice or use cards. Like Gloomhaven had that skill deck essentially, and you draw from that. And I don't think it was called, it was like a modifier deck, and you draw from that, which would give you +1 or +2 type thing. This one allows you to do not only the modifier deck, but also dice, or kind of a mix of both. I thought that was really, really cool. So on top of all that craziness, here's all the monster boxes I was talking about. So you don't really know what's going on in this game until you go through the narrative of each chapter. And then you're going to be going up against some giant big bad. And I think that's what really makes this game shine, is those epic moments when you're fighting these gigantic monsters on the game board. And it's going to look beautiful. They're going to ramp this production on this thing, looks crazy. And if you get all the miniatures, which you don't have to, but if you do, you're going to have some really beautiful tabletop looking adventure. So in terms of the epicness, I think this one probably wins for the most epic Kickstarter coming of 2020 for sure, just due to its size alone. But overall, this is just going to be something special, I think. I think it's going to stick around for quite some time, just based on the very interesting mechanics it's woven in there. And it's going to probably allow for some really unique adventures that are going to stick with you. Things that I think are going to, when they happen, you're going to be excited to talk to them about with your friends and say, remember that time we fought that gigantic rat, and then you did this and I did this. We took that thing down. Like, those boss fights are just super exciting. The terrain box here also able to ramp up, and these things are massive trees, ramp up the quality and look and immersion of the game. So there's a lot of content here, but yeah, a lot of people know about Oathsworn by this point. We covered it on the channel as well, but I am highly looking forward to this one in 2020. Last but not least on the list is Zombicide 2nd Edition. That's right, I'm coming back out of the woodwork on this one, because Zombicide is a game that I just don't own anymore. I had sold off all of my editions of Zombicide as of earlier this year, and then Zombicide 2.0 came out, or 2nd Edition. This one's going to land by CMON this year, and it did pique my interest because it's going to do some things better than those original ones did, and it also looks to have some interesting things as it's learned from some of the prior Zombicide entries. Now again, this is still Zombicide here, so it's not going to be an overhaul or anything too massive in terms of its changes, but there's going to be some things like refined and streamlined rules. So they're baking some of the tokens in terms of setup into the game maps themselves to reduce setup time, which is great news when you're talking about a game with a lot of miniatures. This one also has updates to the target priority for range attacks. That's huge. Interactions with doors, vehicle mechanics. Like, they're just taking a lot of things they've learned from the prior games and making Zombicide better. So that's exciting. I'm also intrigued by the fact that when the electronic version of that system comes out from CMON that I can't pronounce and I won't bother trying, that particular system might, and I don't want to say this to cause any confusion, I don't know if it will, because I know there's a Zombicide New Vegas that's coming out specifically for the electronic system. But I don't know if Zombicide 2nd Edition will actually be used in that, but I think it might, or it might have the capability to. So that's another reason why I'm intrigued, because I do want to use that electronic system that they're planning on putting out, and that's something else I'm kind of looking forward to see how they actually implement it and whether they do it well. But regardless, I'll have 2nd Edition, even if only Vegas is the one that comes out with Tubaru, I think it's called. So This is the project itself, of course. Zombicide, very successful. This is crazy successful, honestly, compared to some of the other ones they did. 3 million, almost 3.5 million, 21,000 people. But it just, again, it's got all kinds of parodies in here in terms of the characters that they've pulled into this one. And they've revamped a lot of the stuff here. Again, the whole idea being like streamline, streamline, streamline. Get it so that it's quicker to the table, quicker to play. There's a lot of crazy miniatures in here, and it's just insanity. But if you want a game that you're just going to sit down and you're not going to really stress in terms of, the barrier to entry to actually enjoy a game is very low on this one. And they kind of went all out. They've got a travel Zombicide edition. They've got these different expansions to add kind of a militaristic side to this whole thing with Fort Hendricks, Washington, ZC expansions. But yeah, looking forward to it. I want to see what's new and different. Again, I might play it and I might hit a wall with it at a certain point, but it's Zombicide. And I still have a love for this game, being that honestly, this was one of my first, Zombicide, the original one, was one of my first truly Ameritrash dice chucking games, and I really enjoyed it way back then. So I still have a soft spot for it in my heart, even though I've played it to death, and definitely looking for new experiences. But I still think this is a fantastic solo option for people out there, because there's a number of solo players that I know really still love Zombicide to this day. And that's going to conclude my top 20 most anticipated solo games of 2020. Now, some of you guys might be wondering on the channel, where has the latest playthroughs been? It's been a bit since you've actually done a playthrough. You're right, it's actually been since mid-January that I actually finished off Masters of the Night, so I completely understand the excitement level to see more playthroughs on the channel in the near future. But I do want to let everyone know, in case you don't know, because I didn't make it completely widespread knowledge, but my wife gave birth to our son, and that happened near the tail end of January, so I definitely wanted to put some playthroughs kind of on the back burner for a bit and make the focus more so on my family than the channel until things get into a routine, of which it's starting to become a thing right now. So we will be diving into, and I have been working on playthroughs behind the scenes, which I haven't actually released yet, as I'm fine-tuning some of them. But the fact is, I wanted to let you know that they are coming, because I know some of you guys really enjoy my showcases or my Kickstarter previews on the channel, and I've certainly not stopped any of those. I've just put a hold on them so I can really focus on my family. So I hopefully, during this last month or so, you've seen a number of lists and other style of videos, like the new recap video that I put out, that are going to keep you interested and intrigued, and also informed on some of the games upcoming, more so than just taking a look at one single playthrough. So I think a video like this will help a lot of you guys looking at games coming in 2020 and trying to make decisions on which ones you think you might be interested in. But besides my list of 20, which I've already talked about, is just a personal list, I really want to hear yours. So let me know in the comments below, what games are you anticipating? What are you really excited about in 2020? Because there are tons of games out there, and I could not possibly get a list large enough to cover the amount of awesome ones there are out there, and I probably missed one that I'm even excited about anyway. So let me know in the comments below what you think is awesome, what you're excited for, and we will talk about that in the comments along with everybody else here in the community. Thank you so much for watching, and as always, keep on rolling solo.